Mute, now they
But
can hear you. Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3.
Planning Council, I want to thank everybody for being here. Brian couldn't be here to chair this meeting, but that's fine. Needs a vacation sometimes too. So Rachel, you want to call for the roll call?
Honorable Jerry Summers, Mr. Charlie Spalding, Mr. Keith Griffey,
Here.
Honorable Scott Bates,
Here.
Mr. Jason Stanley,
Here.
Ms. Emily Lou, Mr. Tony Parrott, Mr. Mike King.
Here.
Honorable David Vogel, Urban, Mr. Brian Vogel, Honorable Dan Eisen, Mr. Ryan Lipke, Mr. Lawrence Blackaby, Honorable Scott Travis, Ms. Julie Sweezy, Honorable John Ogburn, Ms. Diana Arnold.
Here.
So we do have quorum.
Yes.
All right. Okay, we need a approval for the minutes from July 11, 2023 meeting.
So moved.
Thank you. Motion, a second.
I'll second
All right, second by Jason. All in favor, approval by raising your right hand or saying yes. And any opposed? Okay, keep the staff updates. Where we want to start on that.
This I can kick us off. So in addition to sort of our regular grant admin activities, we've been going strong with cleaner water grants and state revolving loan fund right now, doing a lot of water and wastewater projects. The IUP was just released for those. So call for projects is out, and my colleague Justin's been hard at work, updating project profiles and getting everything together for that. So that Water Management Council meeting will be this afternoon at 1:30 for any of y'all that want to stick around and attend that as well. And then I am currently working on a project with the state's Energy and Environment Cabinet. I think I probably mentioned this in the last meeting, but we had our first stakeholder meeting in early September. So that project has to do with energy resilience in critical facilities across our region. I've designed a survey to put out to our critical facilities. So I've been working with a lot of our water and wastewater systems, and then trying to reach out to trade associations in our region, other kind of critical facilities, first responders like fire departments, police stations, critical government facilities, and that sort of thing. And basically, we're trying to collect data on the energy needs of those critical facilities. So do they have the ability to have backup power in the event of a long-term power outage? If not, what sort of energy needs do they need in terms of the size of the generator and that sort of thing? And the ultimate goal is to kind of take some of that data and incorporate it into our update of our hazard mitigation plan a couple of years from now. And then with that, there's also some grant funding that will be available to carry some of those projects out. So grant funding like hazard mitigation, there's building resilient infrastructure and communities funding, BRIC funding, that's sort of a subset that's been earmarked from hazard mitigation funding that can specifically be used for those projects. And then there are a few other grant funding sources as well. So sort of provides some initial project scoping as well to sort of identify some of those potential projects. So that's sort of in my world as of late. Anybody else have any updates on other stuff?
Yeah, sure. So TIPTA will be submitting an application for an EPA Brownfield Assessment Coalition grant with other partners around the region. And I think that we can apply for a maximum of 1.5 million that can be used for brownfield planning and assessment. That would be a phase 1 environmental site assessment of properties that can be used for redevelopment. That's due in November, so we'll be getting that in November.
Yeah, so we just turned in two really big EDA grant applications, one for the city of Shepherdville for their wastewater treatment plant. And the other for Trimble County, which is the Recompete program, which is a huge strategic planning initiative to identify about 4 major economic development activities we can carry out there. We're hoping to hear back from those in the next couple of months. And I also want to put a plug in for CDBG. There's still applications open for housing and economic development. So if you have any needs there, that you think might meet those requirements, let me know and we can look into it.
Nick, do you have anything to share on the transportation side?
Yeah, just a few quick updates for transportation. The shift process that informs the next state highway plan has been completed. Sponsored projects from the Transportation Policy Committee and the Regional Transportation Committee were scored by KYPC, and the projects were chosen by the committees to receive additional points on those scores through a boosting process. 11 projects were boosted in Jefferson County, 4 in Bullitt County, 3 in Oldham and Shelby counties, and 2 in each of Spencer, Henry, and Trimble counties. There was some discussion that the Louisville MPO did not receive enough boosts based on either their population or vehicle miles traveled in the area compared to other MPOs. A subcommittee was formed to communicate those concerns and hopefully influence the next shift process, which should take 2 years. The Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program selected a consulting firm of HDR and Palmer Engineering to develop safety action plans for each of the participating jurisdictions. Implementation plans are expected in 12 to 18 months. And the KYPC planning study for a new interchange on Interstate 64 between the Gene Snyder Freeway and Simpsonville had 2 public meetings that were attended by over 100 people each. The comments from the surveys of those meetings were about 60% in favor of a new interchange and 40% against building a new one. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Nick. Think that,
Is that everybody then?
so,
I want to just say, as Henry County Judge Executive, thank you to all the KIPTA staff because you've been nothing but a help to us, a benefit, and whatever my needs have been, you have been able to help and try to make those things work and help send me in the right direction or whatever. And I want to say thank you to all you guys. It's been a big help to a new judge.
Thank you.
thank you, Nick.
Okay, the county quarterly updates. Do we have anything from maybe Trimble County?
No, we don't. We have a zone change pending, so, and perhaps an affordable housing development depending on the outcome.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, thank you. I know Judge Ogden probably is in the 911 meeting that I was supposed to be in, so I'm sure that's probably where he's at today. But and then I don't think anybody was here from Spencer County or Shelby, was there?
There he is.
Here comes Judge Ogden right here. He may have us an update. We just got to the county part, John, wanting to see if any updates. Do you have anything going on in your county that you want to update us on? As far as what's going on in your county?
We've got a lot going on. Like I said, these all over here, so we applied for several grants. And just waiting on that information to come in to see if we get them or not.
And I before you come in, that's what I was saying. Thank you to all this staff for what all they've done for us. New judges, it's been a real help to us, I will say.
I've been working pretty hard, Scott. So
Yeah. Yeah.
appreciate your help.
As far as Henry County, Jason, you want to give an update on what's going on in planning and zoning?
Well, I mean, this is my first meeting, so I don't know what you're looking for, but of course, you know, the bigger things are Angels Envy. It's constantly building warehouses and a barrel blending facility right now. Of course, they're pre-planning a distillery, but that's way out. We had a meeting on substations and stuff of that, so it's in the works, but it's a long way out, I'd say, years, so. But they're working on it, so. And I'd say that's the biggest thing that we're messing with, but
We are working on the update of your comprehensive plan. So you should have that hopefully within a month or so to
yeah.
review.
And I'm new, I got something on the mapping of it,
Yes.
and I don't,
Did they send you mapping?
no. Well, I don't know, I don't wanna go into it too much, but. So the previous administrator was getting the emails and she sent me something about updating the maps or something.
So our GIS department, they actually created, I think, an app for you with all the zoning of all the parcels. So anytime that there's a zone change, you as the administrator can actually go in and change that zoning to the new zoning.
Right.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yes,
I'll get our GIS staff to come meet with you and show you how everything works.
that'd be helpful.
Okay.
Cause I don't
We
know,
will-
I got all of
How about we all come out there and we'll all sit down and kind of figure out where we're at. Because I know that the previous director worked on the comprehensive plan and then left, and that's why it's kind of just been in limbo. So we're updating the data, updating some of the narrative as well, but I think we really need to focus on the future land use map. And go from there, but we'll show you how to update the zoning layer
Okay.
for your mapping.
Thank you. And there is a lot of things going on in Henry County. We've got a lot of interest as far as, people wanting to come to Henry County. Of course, the 146 project is really going good. They're getting along very well with it. They're gonna start putting, gravel down this next week is what they told me at the Rock Quarry. So they're getting along very well and pleased with that. We got other distilleries interested in coming. We're just trying to work out all the details. We've been talking to some about this affordable housing. I know we're supposed to be getting something from the Kentucky Housing Corporation next, but we've been trying to figure some way to do some affordable housing. And my issue is what's affordable. It's according to who you're talking to, what's affordable. And so there are just a lot of good things happening. I feel like we're going to have a lot of growth in Henry County in the next few years. We just want to do it the right way. And so I feel good about what's going on in Henry County. Mike, you got any? This is Mike Ray. He was kind of probably the spearhead maybe for planning and zoning in Henry County. He's been with helping volunteering for countless hours. And I want to thank him here publicly for all that, but he's a wealth of knowledge on the planning and zoning side, and we just thought it'd be good for him to be able to come to this meeting today. So Mike, you got anything?
I don't have anything. I appreciate having the opportunity to come here. I think we talked before with the Kentucky Housing Authority that you had a presentation in Trimble County, how KIPTA helped us from the very beginning with planning and zoning starting in the 80s. But appreciate what you're doing too. You haven't brought up here, but the expansion of sewers possibly in Henry County, and the affordable housing, I think, is a big issue right now. And anything that we can do to provide that for our county. Our comprehensive plan, is you've indicated, is being updated, is to provide housing for safe housing for the entire population area. So it's something that affects planning and zoning, it affects economic development, it affects local government. But I think there were some good ideas that Kentucky Housing had of not just affordable housing, but available housing, and then how do you work from there to provide housing that is affordable for people that is beneficial not only for the individual, but for the community. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and glad to get any information that I can as to how we can progress in the county relative to issues of planning and zoning, including affordable housing.
Judge, you have an open seat on this board. If you fiscal court or the planning commission want to appoint him to this board, he can be part of it.
Yes, I would like to,
Would you like?
if Mike accept that, I would like for Mike to be on here for the county.
I'd be interested. I don't know what's involved. Is it once a month? Is
It's
it
just, it's quarterly.
quarterly?
Yeah, once a quarter, so.
But yeah, I'd be glad to.
Okay.
Okay,
All right, that sounds good. Thank you.
I'll touch base with you after the meeting and I can
Okay.
loop you in on that.
All right.
Yeah,
Thanks.
sounds great.
Okay, any other county updates?
I think we have Emily and Mike from Louisville Metro here. I don't know if
Okay,
y'all want to give us any updates.
Yes, this is Emily Liu. I'm with Louisville Metro Office of Planning. Since we're talking about housing, I would like to get that subject first. First of all, last week, the mayor released Louisville's affordable housing plan, 15,000 in the next 4 years, detailed in the document. But also would like to you to know that I'm very fortunate to work at the national level, sitting on the Housing Supply Accelerate Steering Committee that co-hosted by National League of City and American Planning Association. So for the last 6 months, a group of planners and city mayors and council members have been get together on a regular basis to talk about this very important issue, not just to this region, but across the country, trying to come up with some solutions for housing issues that facing every community everywhere. Hopefully we'll have some recommendation later this year, early next year, and I'll be happy to give a little bit more detailed update at our next meeting, if that's time allows. So this is something going on at the national level. And also in Louisville, believe it or not, our comprehensive plan, which was adopted, became effective January 1st, 2019. We are reaching the end of 5th year, which means we need to update. Generally speaking, everything seemed to be okay, the goals and objective and policies, but at the minimum we need to do is look at the data. So we are working with University of Louisville, trying to update the data. The census 2020 were released a few years ago, actually after the Plan 2040 was adopted. So that's something we're working on right now. The other one is, a lot of you may already know that HUD released a grant request. It was called Pro Housing Grant. Basically, all the city, municipality, or government agency can apply for this $85 million set aside for reform the zoning and housing related. So Louisville is interested in applying for that grant. We have a draft application out there, ask the community for comments. So that grant deadline is end of this month. So Louisville is definitely interested in submitting a grant. If we're successful, that grant will help our office to totally update our zoning code, kind of a complete overhaul of the zoning code. Hopefully we'll be successful in that. The other thing I would like to mention is, you probably heard or read in the newspaper, is we recently revised our short-term rental regulation, which has been in place since 2015, 8 years, but every few years, there's something we need to tweak and change. So this year we make some changes to tighten up a little bit. So our goal has always been, short-term rental is a new, kind of a new thing, innovative, creative. So we don't want to shut it down. We want to embrace it. At the same time, we want to protect the character of our neighborhood. So what we did over the years, make changes, is trying to do both, embrace this new economy, at the same time, shared economy, at the same time, protect our neighborhood. I think our new revised document or law basically is getting close to do both. So if you're interested, let me know. I can share that with you. Actually, it's posted online. So that passed Metro Council just about a month ago. It's became effective right now. So we are looking at some new procedures, some new ways to regulate short-term rental. I have a few. Oh, the other thing is accessory dwelling unit or granny flat. We have made a lot of progress towards that 2 years ago. We passed, Louisville Metro Council passed a law allowing accessory dwelling unit or granny flat, mother-in-law suite, whatever you call it, is now allowed by right. Basically means you just go and pull a permit instead of going through a public hearing or the neighbors weigh in. So this has increased significant in application for this. Basically, within the first year, our application increased tenfold. This is another way for Louisville and other cities across the country to offer a diverse housing type. They are usually very small in the backyard or a part of your house, very, very small, usually not more than 800 square feet, allow your family to stay together, or in certain cases, you can also make it a rental. So it definitely offer a diverse housing type for this area. And recently we have released a request for proposal for architect to give us some plans. So we're going to do approved development plan for ADUs. We have some money we set aside to award the architect who submit the accessory dwelling unit architectural and construction plan. So once we purchase that, the citizen can use that free of charge. So we're in the process of selecting probably 3 to 5 plans that we can award, not just the money, but also purchase those plans so that it can be free of charge for everybody to use. Mike may have a few things. Mike, are you there, Mike?
Yeah, and sorry I can't be on video, but I'm driving right now. Just a couple things. We've been very fortunate that we were awarded 4 grants through the BIL program, 2 RAISE grants, 1 Safe Streets for All grant, 1 SMART grant. Those are all now beginning to be administered. This is obviously kind of the first round of these that we've gotten in some time. So as folks begin to potentially apply in your own communities or hopefully get awarded, we'd be happy to share any kind of lessons learned that we've gotten thus far. And that's kind of the gist of it for now.
Okay, thank you all.
Yeah, thanks, Emily and Mike. And Emily, I would definitely be interested in following up with you on some of the updates to the short-term rentals. That's something that I've just kind of personally been interested in and following
Okay.
along with other cities.
Absolutely. Do you have my contact information?
I do, yep.
Okay, yeah, anytime. Be happy.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
We have Bullock
Mail.
County and Shelby Fund.
Okay, I didn't see them on here. What about Bullock County?
I can do that one real quick. We got quite a few things going on in the last quarter. We have cut the ribbon on our water projects with a lot of help from the KIPTA staff. They did a great job with us on that. Roe Hill, Eagles Run. We started the construction on getting water to places that we never thought we would be able to get water. Along the same lines with the infrastructure, we've basically cut the ribbon on the expansion of fiber optic in the county, a $6.9 million project that we've got started to get high-speed internet access to parts of the county that would have never had it. We are getting ready to start the comprehensive plan. We've been working on that for just getting the pieces in place for about the last year. So that will start here, hopefully in the next month. We've got an expansion of EMS services to Lebanon Junction. We are building a building to house our ambulances, but we're also going to have a little clinic attached to that as well for the underserved in LJ. And actually next week, I'll be going up with a group of folks to speak in Frankfurt at a committee meeting on some of the roads that we're working on, not the least of which is Highway 44, to make sure the funding stays there. So they've invited us to come up and speak our piece up there. So we'll be doing that next week. So a lot going on here, and we appreciate everything that KIPTA staff has done for us. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Keith. Is somebody here from Shelby County? Okay. We'll move on.
Here. I'm here.
John Park, here he is. John, you want to give us an update? Good to see you today, bud.
Good to see you. I've come in late. A lot of things going on in Shelby County. I don't want to, I don't have a whole lot that I can share right now, but things are very busy here.
Yes, sir. I understand. It's a busy time. I saw your judge yesterday in Jacoby Sales, and it is a busy time. Okay, is that all the county updates in?
Yeah.
All right, thank you, everybody. Okay, next is our Kentucky Housing Corporation. Are they on here?
That would be me.
Curtis.
Okay, I'm sorry, I wasn't sure who it was gonna be. It's different than we usually have, but okay, we'll turn the floor over to you. I don't know if you want to just.
Well, I got a PowerPoint ready to roll.
Okay,
Right.
thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. First off, I want to offer my boss's apologies. Wendy Smith, the Deputy Director of Housing Program. She hoped to be here, but she's actually out of the country right now, taking some well-deserved time off. So you get me instead. So sorry about that. What the goal of this presentation today is just give you a quick overview of KHC, what we do, but more importantly, start thinking about how the housing market is operating, both in the Commonwealth as a whole, but also getting you guys to think a little bit more constructively about the gaps you're identifying in your own communities. As you all well know, at least from some of the discussions we've had already today, everybody is starting to realize that housing is a top priority throughout the sectors you're trying to reach for the future of our communities and the safety and security of our residents. So we really have to be more proactive, more thoughtful as how we're approaching housing policies, and more importantly, the policies that you as local governments can bring to the table to make the development of housing, particularly affordable housing, easier and faster to better meet the needs of your residents and the employers that want to be in your communities. So with that, we'll get rolling. So KHC, we fall in a fairly unique spot in the Commonwealth. We are a quasi-governmental entity, so we're a private nonprofit corporation. We serve as a state housing finance agency, which every state in the country has, primarily responsible for housing finance tools such as low-income housing tax credits, 4% bonds. We do have bonding authority, but we do a lot more that some other state housing finance agencies also don't do. And we do that all through money we either generate through grants from the federal government, utilizing funds appropriated from the State Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which is funded via transaction fees on real estate transactions. And we don't get any state appropriations for the work we do. So we are fairly independent and unattached to the vagaries of the legislature, aside from how they choose to appropriate funds via the one-time funding we've seen recently for additional trust fund dollars in response to the disasters. So we get a whole lot of resources coming to the table to do our work, which is trying to increase affordable housing opportunities for our Kentuckians. We get private equity invested via the low-income housing tax credits, which are highly competitive. Tax-exempt bonds, which have become much more competitive in recent years. Oftentimes those are sort of, if you need them, you can use them, due to the caps on bonding authority and the great demands we're seeing from not only housing projects, but other infrastructure projects and economic development projects across the state. Kentucky is nearing its bond cap on an annual basis. So that resource is not quite as available as it used to be. We serve as a mortgage lender making loans via private sector mortgage brokers that we then will sell on the private market, either through mortgage revenue bonds or through the Fannie and Ginnie Mae syndication programs to generate rent revenue that allows us to do our work as well. So we generate some profits on those that give us more discretionary funding to support other affordable housing activities. We serve as the Commonwealth's grantee for a number of HUD programs, including the Home Investment Partnerships Program, Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS, and the Emergency Solutions Grants Program for Homeless Services. We also serve as the collaborative applicant for the Kentucky Balance of State Continuum of Care, via which we apply for nationally competitive funding for homeless programs via the Continuum of Care program. We got right around $250 million out the door over the past 3 years to help keep people in their homes via the Treasury Emergency Rental Assistance Program through a number of funding phases for that. As you all should be aware, that program is ran down in January for the general public. However, we have preserved a small portion of those funds for a court-based eviction diversion program. So if you know somebody that has an active case in court, and they're facing eviction, they can reach out to KHC for possible rental assistance to go to their current landlord to allow them to stay there, or a short-term voucher to allow them to get a new home in the event they are evicted. You can find information about that on our website at www.kyhousing.org. And that is for serving the balance of state, so the 118 counties excluding Fayette and Jefferson. Because they have their own eviction programs and separate emergency rental assistance funds. Just this past year, the legislature appropriated funding for a rural housing trust fund to support disaster recovery in Eastern and Western Kentucky. And we also partner with our community action agencies to serve as the administrative arm of the DOE and LIHEAP funded weatherization assistance programs, which helps low-income Kentuckians make their homes more energy efficient and makes their homes more affordable by significantly reducing their energy costs. So we serve a range of populations, home buyers and homeowners through our lending programs. We also fund utilizing Kentucky Public Housing Trust Fund dollars and home investment partnerships, single family home buyer development, which is done funded through community-based nonprofit organizations. We do a lot of rental housing financing using both for-profit and nonprofit developers who apply for those competitive funds, primarily low-income housing tax credits and the home investment partnerships and 4% bonds, supplemented with a little bit of trust fund money as a gap filler. And again, we provide homeless programs funding community-based organizations to help prevent and end homelessness in the Commonwealth. The types of housing we build range from very small to very big. This is an example of a small subdivision that was developed in Hazard, utilizing both home and affordable housing trust fund dollars, as well as some other funds the Housing Development Alliance has brought to the table. And this has been a great resource, particularly as it's been occupied in some respects by folks who are recovering from the flooding disaster, which was unanticipated because it's predated the disaster. If you go to the next slide. We also have larger scale multifamily projects and really small multifamily projects. So for example, you'll see this large senior living apartment, which I believe is in an 80, 90 unit size, if I remember correctly, in Northern Kentucky, as well as a duplex done by Partnership Housing, a small community-based developer in Owsley County. And they are the only entity building rental housing in their community. So it's a vital role that we play by even funding these small scale developments where she's been doing duplexes and fourplexes, in addition to building for sale homeownership units. Here's another example of the senior living development in our region over in Bullock County with 87 units that opened this year. You can go to the next slide. And this just gives you a sense of the wide array of resources we bring to the table. And this is from our fiscal year 2022 investments. We brought over $1.3 billion to the table to invest in housing, homeless services. So you'll see our single family lending program generates a huge amount of investment in enabling low-income Kentuckians to buy and occupy homes. We helped build, utilizing nearly $9 million, and rehabbed 171 single family units. We created or assisted over 2,300 multifamily units in that year. We also have some rental assistance programs. One of the roles I didn't mention is we serve as a public housing authority for 87 counties, providing housing choice vouchers. We also administer on a statewide basis some specialized vouchers that serve higher need populations, such as families involved in the foster care system and folks experiencing homelessness and or risk of homelessness. So we are serving that role and basically being the main line of affordable housing in many smaller communities by fulfilling a PHA responsibility. And we've got our homeless and special needs programs that utilize HUD funding to serve folks who are most at risk of both living and or dying on the streets. And you'll see a large amount of money, which is going to increase significantly as a result of the bill funding received for weatherization over the next few years. That $15 million is our typical annual investment, but we are looking at upwards of an additional $20 to $30 million a year as a result of the bill funding over the next 5 to 10 years. So right now, we're really focused on 2 big priorities. One, and this is something you guys are seeing every day in your communities, there's not enough housing, period, no matter what type you're talking about in the Commonwealth to meet the needs of our population. And those housing needs were significantly exacerbated by two massive disasters in the past couple of years, the tornadoes in Western Kentucky and the horrific flooding in 2021 and 22 in Eastern Kentucky. So one book that has really sort of helped concentrate folks' thoughts around this housing supply issue is Homelessness is a Housing Problem by Greg Colburn. We've read this as sort of a forced book club for KC management over the course of last year, but he does a really effective job in counteracting arguments about homelessness being an individual problem and really lays out data presenting that it's a societal, structural, and particularly economic problem. We just do not have enough units in markets that need to be served. And one thing that he's shown is you look at some of the places that are seeing some of our worst homelessness problems, they've also seen some of the most rapid economic growth in the past 10 to 20 years. Your Seattle, your Portland, Los Angeles, New York. And basically you're seeing this growth, increasing demand for housing and not enough housing to meet that demand. And therefore folks on the margin of society who are most economically at risk are getting pushed out of homes and into homelessness. But one thing that he also points out is that no matter where you're making increases in the housing supply, whether it's on the lowest end of the market with specialized units serving those leaving homelessness, all the way up to the highest end of the market where you're building luxury units, every addition to the market helps increase the capacity of us to house people in our communities. And you'll see this little chart a few times in this presentation. We stole this from Washington State, who did a really effective housing needs assessment on a county by county basis over the past couple of years. And they have sort of broken out the categories of housing, and you really need to fill housing need across the entirety of this continuum, again, ranging from our lowest income folks all the way up to the upper ends of the market rate. So what we're seeing impacts of housing supply, particularly in our post-COVID era, is increased construction costs, including labor, and supply chain challenges, which also rise costs, and time on building units, which also increases construction costs and more precisely construction loan costs because you're paying more interest on it. Rising interest rates are a huge barrier for many of our developments we're seeing. Those that have been approved in recent years for, say, LIHTC funding, having gaps appear because of both the increasing costs they're facing in the market, but more importantly, they're having to pay a lot more for their construction loans. We are seeing population growth and demand in many communities outreaching our housing supply. And obviously, as I mentioned before, the disasters have wiped out a lot of housing supply that was available. And then we have a deteriorating and unsuitable housing stock in many of our communities, particularly in some of our poorer rural regions, that you really not consider long-term or sustainable housing solutions. So we lose the supply, there's more homelessness, there's more difficulty filling jobs that are available in our communities. There's increased eviction and foreclosure, so we're seeing more court costs. And then when we see more homelessness, we see impacts across all systems, including our criminal justice systems, our healthcare systems, and our public safety initiatives. So as I've said, we have a shortage across every single one of those sectors of housing. However, it's most dire for our folks at the lowest end. The National Low Income Housing Coalition estimated in this year's The Gap report that the state has a shortage of 89,375 rental units just for those at or below 30% of their median income. So you can extrapolate that need across other income sectors, but it's most great at that point. For HUD funding, we're required to do analysis of dependency, fair housing choice. And one of the top factors we find in limiting fair housing choice and our supply of housing is a lack of adequate housing supply in both urban and rural communities. We see this as a universal problem. And it's the greatest challenge for folks finding and obtaining housing in the state. And it's a ballpark figure. And for those of you who are familiar with the HUD point in time count, it is not a great assessment of homelessness, but it's what HUD used to drive data. And every January, we're seeing in the balance of state about 4,000 folks experiencing homelessness on any given night. And that is an undercount, straight up. So you'll see we've had a number of our counties severely impacted by the recent natural disasters, destroying and taking away from our housing supply over 5,000 units. Go ahead. And we're also seeing, as the governor likes to announce on a regular basis, we're bringing lots and lots of jobs to the Commonwealth, and particularly the greater Louisville area. And we're seeing a lot of them related to the investments coming for green infrastructure, including electric vehicles. Saw a report from the Hardin County Chamber of Commerce that came out probably a month or two ago, estimating that they're going to need 8,500 units in Elizabethtown over the next 5 years to meet the needs from the Blue Oval battery plant. Well, that's a lot to bring on the table. We might not have resources to do it. So until we find a way to better meet this housing need, we're going to see increased homelessness. And more importantly, we're going to see folks that have less money to spend on their regular day-to-day activities. They're spending half their money on housing. That's less money they can spend on food. That's less money they can spend on entertainment. That's less money they can spend on healthcare. And it puts them all at risk. And something I suspect you all see being local government administrators is if you try to do something to increase your local affordable housing supply, the people that might be next door to that housing supply do not like it. So we see, as many of you already discussed, a need to revise zoning regulations to facilitate the development of more multifamily units and or smaller single family type development or homeownership units such as duplexes or quads that are currently not developable in the vast majority of the KIPTA area due to zoning regulations. And so that can be a barrier in terms of out and out NIMBYism from residents who oppose those developments to the challenge of getting a lot rezoned that can, depending on how your community works and your hearing schedules and the steps it takes you there, that can take a year and a half to make your land buildable. And that year and a half to go from proposal to build time is increased costs and lost opportunities for the developers trying to work in your community. One thing that this is a real hard problem to solve. The 2008 recession wiped out the construction industry across the nation. And it was particularly true in our smaller communities and rural areas where you might have had mom and pop shops that just couldn't make it go of it anymore. And it hasn't come back. And we're seeing it even more difficult in this rising interest rate market for the builders that are there and or anybody wishing to get into the business to access the capital they're going to need to build things on the ground. And we are not building enough new stuff, particularly stuff that's attainable for the middle and lower parts of our economic spectrum. So this you can basically use as a chart to see how we were building starter homes in this country over the last 40 years. We're not. We stopped. As you've seen in many of the suburban communities in Louisville, builders are only building larger scale McMansion type luxury units because that's what makes them money. So until we find a way to incentivize the structure to ensure we're getting more of these affordable units built, we're going to continue to have an underserved home buyer market for our first-time home buyers and our more working class folks. And when people are talking about affordable housing, they're like, oh, I don't want to be living next to that homeless person or that person who is getting by on a McDonald's job. These are your teachers. These are your firefighters. These are people who are trying to find a place to live. They can't afford to live in our communities on the salaries they make because the housing supply has not made it feasible. And as you can see, the construction industry and the housing development market has not recovered from the 2008 recession. We've seen a little bit of a bump as a result of COVID funding coming to bear. particularly some states, although it hasn't happened yet in Kentucky, choosing to reallocate ARA money for housing development. Louisville has done some of that in their proposals. So we are seeing some growth, but it's nowhere near enough. But if you look at the smaller end of the market, we are seeing nothing happening on the small scale development, and it's been continuing with no change. All right, give me a slide. So we're seeing again this sort of missing middle, small scale development that is often more affordable to both middle and lower income folks, not being built. A lot of new construction, aside from that, which has been directly subsidized from LIHTC development for multifamily we're seeing nationwide, is the upper end of the market, because again, that's where folks are making their money. So we got to find ways to ensure and incentivize developers to build that middle end part of the market and the lower end of the market as well.
Hey, Lawrence, would you mind muting your mic there?
I forgot what the other track is. I never did find this track. Alright, I'll check it out.
No worries. And as I said, time is money. So what we're seeing is a challenge in getting units to the market quickly, having the builder capacity to get it done. Pretty much everything in Kentucky is still stick built. We're not seeing a lot of innovation in construction technology. There's been some nationwide. Some of you might have seen some 3D printed houses using concrete printers. Some communities are really focusing on getting a lot more modular or manufactured housing in place. I do know that Louisville is working with Manufactured Housing Institute, I believe Clayton Homes, to try to get some spec homes built for infill development on narrow lots in Louisville, sort of your, for lack of a better term, your shotgun replacements. So we really do need to see more creative thinking about how we build our homes to make it faster and cheaper. Frontier Housing in Moorhead is considering marrying a model where they are going to build a house factory, where they're going to basically build modular housing in pieces that's adaptable to meet the needs of the home buyers. Modeled on a very successful program in Southwest Texas. So hopefully we'll see that model come to Kentucky over the course of the next couple of years. And unfortunately, there's not enough money publicly available to get this job done and fill the need. Federal funding has been really flat, if not reduced, over the years. If you look at inflation adjusted funding since the 70s for affordable housing development from the feds. The most successful program in development in recent decades has been low income housing tax credit, and the need for those funds is always oversubscribed on an annualized basis. And the federal appropriations we get are not enough to meet the needs expressed across our communities, even by a limited number of communities, sadly, in the balance of state that have effective community-based developers to meet that low-income housing need. And we really aren't seeing any funding from any source working to meet that sort of missing middle income gap we're seeing across the country. So if we were to get more resources available for that table and increasing that housing supply, that should naturally help increase the availability of housing for our lower income folks. Because what you used to see was folks buying that starter home, and as they increase their income, they move up to another home. But due to the lack of supply, the increased housing inaffordability, folks are staying in those starter homes for their entire lives, whether they want to or not, because there's not other resources available. And the challenges we're seeing with increased mortgage rates is making that even more difficult. So I think you all know this is true. We have housing shortages across the entirety of the housing spectrum, and that gaps anywhere across the spectrum can affect housing availability for everybody on the spectrum. Housing is key to our supporting economic development, because if people don't have a place to live, they ain't gonna be able to go to work. And developing more units will address housing instability and help prevent homelessness. Just repeat what I said right there, but make sure you all saw that. Again, thinking about the entirety of the housing market, and trying to meet the needs across all those different income spectrums, and thinking about strategies we can do to facilitate the increasing development of units to meet all those housing populations. And this is one of the best quotes that we found in the Homelessness is a Housing Problem book. Homes where jobs go to sleep at night. And what you find in your communities is everybody's all fired up about bringing a new employer and new tax revenue community and higher paying jobs. But if people don't have a place to live, those jobs are not going to be as impactful as one would hope. So we have to make sure that we're talking about bringing new employers to community and new resources. Do we have the places in your community for the workers to live? Because they're not going to fly in and magically appear overnight. So Bowen National Resource did a survey of employers, sort of in the upper Midwest, Mid-South, including Kentucky. They did this over the course of the last couple of years, in interviewing over 450 employers. You can go to the next one. So, as it relates to housing, over half of the employers interviewed in our greater region said that housing issues adversely impact their business. And they listed these impacts they're seeing from an inadequate housing supply in their community. So it's reducing their productivity, it's hurting employee morale, it's adding to company costs because they're obviously potentially seeing increased wage rates as a result of increased demand for limited workers. They're unable to grow or expand their business as they would like. And they have a hard time retaining employees. And even more importantly, if there's not housing in their community, they have a real hard time getting people to move there to work for them. So as you can see, affordability is the biggest challenge these employers have identified in their communities. Even above challenges such as folks doing long or lengthy commutes. And I think those three things at the top say it, like both homebuyer affordability and rental affordability, housing affordability as a whole is the biggest barrier employers are seeing to best meeting their own needs and growing their businesses. And they said, hey, if we had more housing in our community, we'd probably hire more people. And I think we all want to see that in our communities. We want to see economic growth and better paying jobs for our residents. So what are we going to try to do? As I said, we don't have the money to solve this problem in KHC. We're already oversubscribed in the dollars we have. So how do we help you all plan for and address the needs you identify in your community? Okay. Big thing, we want to do this for your county. Okay, next slide. So this is an example from, again, the Washington State study. This is their statewide assessment about what they've identified as a need. We plan on doing this, but more importantly, if you can go to the next slide. What we hope to do by procuring a researcher to assist us with this is give a breakdown of the continuum for every county in the Commonwealth. So you all, or the folks doing the work on the ground to lead your communities into your future, can more adequately identify your need and plan for the future. And you can use this data when you're talking with folks who are wanting to relocate to your community. Go to the next slide. So we got to think about how we can solve some of these problems. So you have a big employer who wants to set up shop in your county. You might want to talk to them about doing something like employer assisted housing. Be like, hey man, we'd love to have you here, but we don't have enough housing here. Where do you plan on folks who are going to be working at your shop commuting from? So there's examples of employer assisted housing. We've seen more common examples of it across the country from hospitals, the big ones that do it. But for example, French Lick Resort over in Indiana, they are building a subdivision to help provide attainable housing for the folks to work at their resort and their casinos. And you see examples like this starting to become more common, where the employer is becoming a developer and or is subsidizing developments to ensure that their employees can access housing. So you got to think about what problems you're trying to address. Is it affordable housing, specifically workforce housing for a broader income spectrum, or just housing on the whole, where you don't care what type of housing you do, you just need more of it. Additionally, you'll see that housing investment can be a vital step in community revitalization and economic growth. Because again, if you don't have the housing available, you see those employers aren't going to come, nor are they going to expand their workforces for those that are already there, even if they might want to. And this is where you all as local leaders have to come in. You got to think about what are the barriers you're facing Or what are the barriers, say, a developer would face if they want to build more housing in your community? Is there available land that's buildable, say, out of a floodplain, not in a brownfield that might pose a health threat to future residents? Do you have builders that are willing to work in your community and are available? Does your zoning laws make it impossible to build the type of housing you need? And if it does, use your comprehensive planning processes to try to address that and think more broadly for the future. Is it difficult to get permits in your communities? Take a long time. Is it costly? Does it require a lot of hearings? How can you expedite those processes while still allowing sufficient citizen input? Do you have infrastructure in place needed to create housing? So are your roads and your sewers and your electric infrastructure in place? You know, is your market failing? I don't think you're seeing that in the greater Louisville area, but we see this a lot in southeastern Kentucky, where basically the market says the houses aren't worth what it's cost to build them. So what builder in his right mind is going to come and build a home he's going to lose money on? You know, and significantly in many parts of Kentucky, we see really low wages. So even if folks are working full time, they can't afford to rent or buy a unit and afford the other costs of life. And Emily brought this up earlier, and they're seeing a lot in Louisville. How are outside investors and products like Airbnbs affecting your local market? Are they taking what would be attainable units off the table from both the rental and or ownership markets because they've been converted to more specialized uses? One thing we're seeing in some parts of the state, and it's much more prevalent nationwide, but equity investors are buying up trailer parks and they're converting them and basically evicting existing residents to raise rates and or repurpose those properties. So keep an eye on that in your communities, because in many parts of our state, those trailer parks are the low-income housing that's available. So think about all these different factors that might be playing a role in your community. You know, also, are you seeing a lot of your single-family homes being bought up by larger scale investors for could be converted to rental units, which is also taking that affordable homeownership unit off the table for folks in your community as well. There's a ton to consider. You really have to be comprehensive in how you're thinking about how you approach the future of your local housing market. So think about it locally. Think about hopefully using data we should knock on wood be able to provide to you over the course of the next year or two, what your housing market looks like, what are your gaps? What can you do to facilitate that sort of missing middle size housing development, including, you know, your townhomes, your quads, your row home developments that could be more affordable as either homeownership or rental? Do you have infrastructure in place that a developer can come in and build a home on? Are you build ready? Do you have local resources that could fund a down payment assistance program? Could you fund a owner occupied repair program to help keep those homes that might be on the edge of habitability sustainable so folks can age in their homes long-term safely? What other resources can you identify to bring to the table to fund housing development in your community, including working with your employers to think about employer-assisted housing programs? And this is just a couple of examples of some manufactured housing communities that are really coming to the table. My boss has been talking a lot with the Next Step Corporation, which is a nationwide manufactured housing, basically innovator based in Kentucky, but serving folks nationwide, as well as the Kentucky Affordable Housing or Manufactured Housing Institute to talk about how we can bring more sustainable and desirable manufactured housing resources to the table in Kentucky. So these are your manufactured housing units that are being done by Clayton in London, proposed for 2024. Don't look like much like that double wide you used to see in many of your communities, do they? If you go to the next slide. So, as I mentioned, Louisville is working to get manufactured homes designed to build infill lots. Here are examples of other manufactured housing communities developed successfully nationwide, from Florida to California, Ohio. Go to the next slide. These are all examples of different types of manufactured homes. One looks very traditional, but the other one looks like what you would consider a traditional stick-built home to look like, right? And we got a fairly innovative design down there on the lower right. One thing that Next Step is working on is creating what they're calling a net zero ready home, which is going to be highly energy efficient. And if you're willing to slap solar panels on top of it, you're not going to see an electric bill. So you're seeing innovative construction techniques. We're also seeing a lot more modular housing coming to bear that could be able to expedite construction times and reduce construction costs. Next slide. So that's my little quick overview of our housing supply challenges. I want to provide a really quick summary just of some homeless resources and how homelessness response is structured in the state. It's particularly important to think about in KIPTA because you have 2 different continuum of care in your region. Next slide. So a continuum of care is basically a local planning body and funding entity for homeless services via HUD. That brings together government entities, service providers, and other stakeholders to help plan for what we're working towards ending homelessness. There are 3 in the state. There's Lexington, Fayette County, Louisville, Jefferson County, and the Kentucky Balance of State, 118 counties. At KHC, we serve as the collaborative applicant and managing entity for the Balance of State continuum of care. So we serve everywhere but Louisville and Lex. Next slide. There's an array of interventions that are funded through federal resources to help prevent homelessness. And I will preface this by saying these are massively underfunded and do not meet the need that's out there, unfortunately. But you have homelessness prevention, where say somebody's about to get evicted and they just need a little bit of cash to stay in their place and get back on their feet. There's street outreach, which funds folks going out on the ground in their communities, trying to find folks living on the streets or in places unfit for human habitation. Supportive services to help provide emergency shelter and or keep people housed once they get housed. Again, we fund emergency shelter around the state. Rapid rehousing is a short-term housing program that gives folks up to 2 years of assistance to leave their homelessness situation and provides them with rental subsidy and supportive services. And that can be anywhere from short-term, say 3 months, more medium-term rental assistance, 24 months. And then we have permanent supportive housing programs that serve our folks with disabilities who are extraordinarily high need and need basically lifetime supportive services and subsidies to maintain their units. And the vast majority of these housing interventions work on a tenant-based basis. So you need to find landlords going to accept these vouchers. One thing we do for the entirety of the state, all 3 COCs have to use the Kentucky Homeless Management Information System, which gathers data on homelessness and the usage of these different types of programs around the state. Each of the COCs uses what's called a coordinated entry system. And this is designed because we have such limited resources to coordinate intake and assessment of folks experiencing homelessness, prioritize those who are literally most at risk of dying on the streets, and get them quick permanent housing resources in hand for if they are available as quickly as possible. One thing you got to think about with this model, it's not a first come, first served basis. It's more like an emergency room. So say, for example, I broke my arm playing softball. I got to go get it set at the ER. It's about to be my turn. Doc's about to see me. All of a sudden, somebody with a gunshot wound to the head comes in. Am I going to get seen? Nope. That guy who's got that gunshot wound to the head, he's going for me. And I just got to sit there and wait. It ain't fun. It ain't fair. And it hurts a lot, but that's the way it's got to be. So what the coordinated system does is triages and prioritizes folks for those limited housing resources and tries to get them into the best place possible. And each COC manages its own coordinated entry system. Go to the next slide, please. In the Balance of State, we have 118 counties, and we administer the C coordinated entry system on a regional basis. So we use the ad districts as the geographic mirror. And they work with their locally available resources, partnering with the providers in each of those ad districts to assess and refer folks for available housing resources. Unfortunately, in the non-Louisville KIPTA region, we don't have a lot of housing resources and homeless resources out there. We had, due to the CARES Act and some continued funding that we've reallocated some ERA resources towards, VOA Mid-States was able to provide some rapid rehousing in KIPTA, as well as a little bit of street outreach. So they are now serving as the LPC lead agency in your communities, but there's very little resources available, unfortunately, right now in the greater KIPTA region. So anyway, the LPC lead agency coordinates these regular meetings, and they refer folks most in need for the available resources. Go to the next page, please. These are all the LPCs. It's mirror your ad districts. So each one of these communities has their own lead agencies, and all the homeless service providers that are funded with federal resources in these communities get together to plan to assess and refer folks to housing. So if you've identified somebody in your community who's experiencing homelessness, refer them to the coordinated entry system in their community. So in Jefferson County, you can contact the Coalition for the Homeless in Louisville. This is their direct service line, which is 502-637-BEDS, or you can go to their website for more information at bluehomeless.org. And for KIPTA, non-Louisville counties and non-Indiana counties, you can contact Danielle Kavanaugh at VOA Mid-States, and she can help assess and refer folks experiencing homelessness in your community to any of the limited resources that might be available. Next slide. So thank you all for letting me rant and rave at you for this extended period of time. If you have questions about any of our programs, here's an array of KFC contacts. If you want the big picture stuff about policy, priorities, and where we're going to be headed over the next few years, you can talk to my boss, Wendy Smith. If you have questions about rental housing development, reach out to Terry Helton, as she runs our multifamily program division, and she's relatively new in her role. Our single family home buyer development, owner occupied home repair programs, and also the weatherization administrators, Kelly Reynolds, who works on my team. And if you have questions about our homelessness programs, you can reach out to Kenzie Strubank, who also works for the Housing Contract Administration Division. And I can also answer questions related to either of those fronts. And one thing that I recommend that you all do or encourage your local leaders to do, if you're trying to incentivize particularly multifamily development in your community, there's an organization called the Kentucky Affordable Housing Coalition. It's an advocacy group for affordable housing developers. And they can help facilitate an introduction to developers that might be interested in working in your communities. Their website is, if I can find it. So I should have put a slide on this, but I forgot to do that until I arrived here. Is kyaffordablehousing.org. You can reach out to them and they can help do introduction to developers and or provide some feedback on any local policies you might have that they might think are barriers to their folks doing work in your community. And with that, any questions, comments, concerns?
Just this question is kind of just on your all structure, organizational structure. There, like Shelbyville Housing Authority, are you all the governing body of those smaller ones, or are they completely separate entities?
They are completely separate entities. I think there's something like 180 public housing authorities in the Commonwealth, both on county and city bases, and they're all independent authorities. They are aligned under a industry group themselves called the Kentucky Housing Association, but that doesn't really have any policy guidance over them. It's sort of their industry group. So they all work independently, either providing public housing for traditional public housing units like physical units and or housing choice vouchers. But they're all independent entities.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah. But if you are in one of the 87 counties we work in, you can feel free to reach out to me and I can refer you to folks on our tenant assistance program scheme as well.
Thank you.
Starting out from the beginning, what steps would we go through to fill the needs within a county? Do we have to have any type of survey to identify the amount of housing that is needed? Do we have to have any survey as to what income is available for housing? What would be a first step, or is there many steps that need to be done?
I think getting a sense of what your local market looks like, and again, we hope to knock on wood be able to provide some of that data for you all in the future. But in the interim, you can start by working, with your local realtors association, perhaps, to get a sense about what your average sale prices are from the MLS data they're working with. You can basically do a quick survey using Zillow or some other tools to see what your rents are. You can talk to the folks that are trying to utilize public housing authority resources about the challenges that folks that have, say, a housing voucher in your community have in finding a unit. One thing that's really sad that we see, a lot of people lose their housing vouchers, which, as you know, can take in some folks years to obtain because they can't find a unit to rent that'll be both under the fair market rents established by HUD and pass a housing quality inspection. So thinking about what barriers to folks that might want to use a housing voucher of any type, if they have it, to using one in your community might be. So it really is, for a smaller community, just talking to folks and getting a sense about, hey, where do you see the market working? Where is it not working? And then from a government perspective, what can we do to incentivize development again, of any type of housing, but particularly once you've identified from your local stakeholders what your greatest needs are. You know, and talking to your employers too, they'll give you a good sense about how their workers are doing. Then you got to find a developer to work in your community. We have housing deserts as far as community-based housing developers in vast majorities of the state. We don't see housing applications coming from the Kip area for housing development, none. You know, particularly for our small scale, single family stuff, where we have oftentimes, if you get certified as this type of organization by HUD, a community housing development organization, we don't have any in the greater Kipta area. You might have some Habitats for Humanities working in your communities. A lot of those are on an all volunteer basis, and they don't really have the capacity to make a really concerted effort at more sustainable beforehand, larger scale housing development efforts. So you might want to think about what you can do to help address your builder shortage, either from a for-profit or nonprofit standpoint, and what your community could do to incentivize, say, if there's a builder working in an adjacent county or your community, come do some work in your area. You know, so folks here at in the Kipta region, you know, maybe talk to River City Housing in Louisville, or Rebound in Louisville, or New Directions, who do some housing development in Louisville, see if you can get them to cross the borders, come hang out for a little bit. Or talk to perhaps some of the community action agencies to see if they might consider taking on a housing development effort. We do fund some CAs in other parts of the state who are housing developers as well too. So there's a lot of different paths you could take. And I think it really starts with talking with the stakeholders of the community to identify what might be sort of that low hanging fruit you can start to pick off right away. I hope that might answer your question.
It's a big pass, so. I've got another question, maybe general, and if I understood correctly, Louisville is allowing accessory dwelling units without a zone change, which satisfies a need today. But what happens generations from now when that need is not there for a family member? What do you do with this accessory dwelling unit?
I mean, I think what we are seeing nationwide, particularly, has been a pretty big resource in California. A lot of these ADUs are not being developed as granny flats. They're building as accessory units, and they are being rented on the private market as affordable, as more affordable housing units. So they become rental units.
I think the mentality as a whole has really changed since even when planning and zoning come in, everybody wanted a house on 5 acres. And now a lot of the people that I'm talking to, they don't even want a yard to have to mow. They just want somebody to take care of all that. They won't buy their groceries and be able to walk and get their groceries and that kind of thing. I think the mentality has changed in the mindset of the people coming along now. It's just different than it was before.
Yeah, and one thing you also need to think about is how does your current stock meet the needs of an aging population? Because if you got somebody who's got a 5 acre lawn they got to mow on a regular basis, and they can't afford to hire somebody to do it, how's that going to affect their ability to maintain homeownership and not get in trouble with your, community regulations? Conversely, if they have a 2-story house and they're going to be only living on the first floor, or it's too much space for them to maintain, you have places that are more appropriate for somebody to age comfortably. And are there supportive housing resources available in your community for folks that are going to need medical care as they are no longer able to care for themselves independently? So those are other more subpopulation type considerations you need to think about as well, and how your current housing stock meets the needs of your population as it's evolving over the years.
Thank you. Very informative here. I appreciate it. Any other questions, Curtis?
And I'll give a PDF of this presentation to Ryan, and he can send it out.
Yeah, we'll share out all those contacts and everything that were contained in.
And feel free to reach out to any of us with any questions. We never get mad when people ask.
All right, thank you. Any other business, Ryan, that you know of, or?
Not that I know of, unless anybody else has anything.
Okay, public comment period. Do anybody in the public have anything they want to say? All right, if not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, motion by John. Second,
Second.
Right, all in favor, say aye. And thank everybody for coming. We'll see you. What's the next plan?
That will be, check here,
January 9th.
January 9th.
January the 9th. All right, thank you. You all have a good day.
All right, appreciate y'all.
Tracy, I'll put up there on